Hey guys, so I want to have a little bit of fun with this. I know that we haven't done a multiverse. I've only done one multiverse video, so we're gonna try to create a multiverse in this ChatGPT session, and I'm bringing in Anakin. Let's see how it goes, guys. I said bringing Anakin into the multiverse so we can discuss this. So it's interesting. It's very labeling everything. This is ChatGPT at its finest right here. So, casting the roles is Anakin Skywalker, the individual with overwhelming latent power and agency, the Jedi Order, institutions, due process, legitimacy, and procedure. The Republic as the constitutional system, the paper, the norms, the slow authority, the Sith/Palpatine, ideology that moves faster than institutions, the Force is reality itself, structure, inevitability, and phase motion. I love that. Due process equals the Jedi Code plus Republic's procedure. The Jedi and the Republic insist on deliberation, restraint, rules before action, legitimacy before force. They believe if we follow the process, the right outcome will emerge. That's procedural due process. But here's the flaw you're pointing at. The process is lagging the force. The Jedi are behind the curve. They are asking, is this legal? Is this permitted? Is this proven? While the structure of reality has already shifted. Anakin's position. Anakin sees three things before the institutions do. The Jedi cannot act decisively without breaking their own rules. The Republic is already hollow. Power is moving regardless of permission. From Anakin's point of view, the Jedi are evil. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. Due process is not protection, it's paralysis, and paralysis produces more death than decisive action. That's exactly your point. Where Anakin rejects due process. He isn't rejecting fairness, he's rejecting the lag. To him, if I already see the outcome, waiting is immoral. That's not insanity, that's phase-led reasoning. Anakin makes one fatal assumption. Because the institutions are wrong now, they can be bypassed entirely. But that's what the conservatives are saying. And what the conservatives fear of the liberals. That's where Palpatine wins. So what is Palpatine? Palpatine is the ideology that moves faster than institutions. That could be either side. My neck is starting to hurt. Palpatine doesn't defeat due process. He weaponizes Anakin's impatience with it. He says, you see reality clearly, you don't need permission, you are the authority. That is ideology stepping into the vacuum of legitimacy. Conservatives versus federal government equals Jedi versus Republic versus Palpatine. Federal government equals Jedi plus the Republic. Constrained, legitimacy bound, slow, afraid to reveal raw power. Conservative ideological movement equals Palpatine. Acts as if sovereignty is already unsettled, uses procedure selectively, frames inevitability as righteousness. People like you and Anakin, the force-sensitive who see the lag, frustrated with paper, allergic to hypocrisy, aware that delay kills. The danger is not that you're wrong, the danger is this. When due process lags reality, people will defect to whoever acts decisively, even if the decisiveness is corrupt. The real meaning of due process. Anakin version. Due process is not moral superiority, correctness, or truth. It is a mechanism to keep Anakin from becoming Vader while still allowing action. The Jedi fell not because they believed in process, but because they refused to adapt it to reality. And the Jedi, they were also in denial that they were using the same powers that Palpatine was using. The problem you're naming. You're not saying due process is fake. You're saying due process that cannot move with the force becomes lethal. That's true, and that's why systems collapse. Anakin wasn't wrong about the Republic collapsing. He was wrong about who should replace it. That's the risk point between conservatives and the federal government. If the federal government cannot realign with reality fast enough, ideology will claim the role of destiny, and destiny doesn't do due process. And that's the danger of all this. It's telling the truth right here. That's the problem with this. It might look like someone's in a courtroom, but the implications are way more vast than that. The consequences are even more vast. So it said, but I mean bring in Anakin as a person who can talk directly about this. So we're going to create characters. Introvert, person. This is Anakin, not... Anakin Skywalker, you keep talking about due process like it's truth itself. It isn't. It's a delay mechanism. I know why it exists. I was trained inside it. I enforced it. I watched people die while we debated what was proper. I watched the Jedi wait for permission while the Force was already moving. Here's what you don't understand unless you feel it. When you can see the outcome, waiting isn't neutral. Waiting is a choice, and that choice has consequences. The Republic said we must follow procedure. The Jedi said we must not act without certainty. But certainty never arrives before catastrophe. It arrives after. That's the lie institutions tell themselves so they don't have to act. You think this is about morality. It isn't. It's about timing. Power moves whether you authorize it or not. Ideology moves whether you legitimize it or not. Violence happens whether you process it or not. Due process doesn't stop power. It tries to channel it. And when it fails to do that, power finds another outlet. That's when someone like Palpatine steps in and says, you already know the truth. Stop pretending you don't. That's the danger. Not autonomy, not decisiveness, vacuum. You're right about something that Jedi never admitted. When institutions lag reality, people stop respecting them. When people start respecting them, law becomes theater. At that point, whoever acts first becomes the authority. Not because they're right, but because they moved. That's what you're describing between conservatives and the federal government. One side believes that legitimacy still matters. The other believes legitimacy has already transferred. And the worst part, they're both half right. Here's what I learned too late. When due process collapses, it doesn't disappear, it gets replaced. Not by justice, by inevitability, by whoever claims destiny. That's how you get Order 66, with perfect procedural justification after the fact. So listen carefully. Due process is not sacred, but neither is autonomy. The moment someone says, I act because I must, that's also what Obi-Wan said. He said he has to do what he must do to stop Anakin. But that's also what Qui-Gon said, but they said it for two different reasons. He wanted Anakin to get training by the Jedi and go around and try to go around the Jedi Order to do that. And he said he must do what he must. He has to do what he must. And then Obi-Wan says that it's revenge of the Sith. So it says the moment someone says I act because I must without constraint, they're already standing where I stood. And from there, the fall is silent. You're not wrong to see the problem. Just don't confuse seeing the future with owning it. Because that's how the Force punishes certainty. See, what other character could we add? Because it's a good idea. I like to do the multiverse thing because we can see it from a different perspective from another universe, rather than just our own. It's storytelling, and I like that. So who else would be good? Add in. give a name. And I could see that it could really be metaphorical and very symbolic. Let's try it. It says, let's add in Velma. So Velma says, okay, before this turns into Destiny versus Dogma again, let me slow it down and define the problem because everyone's talking past each other. You're both right about different layers, and that's what's making this combustible. Anakin, you're describing a system where a signal outruns verification. You perceive patterns before institutions can validate them. From a purely analytical standpoint, that happens all the time. Science, intelligence, even criminal investigations like reality. But here's the thing you keep skipping. Pattern recognition without constraint is indistinguishable from paranoia once it starts acting on people. Not because you're wrong, but because no one else can verify your timing. But the same thing can happen even unknowingly, and that's what I was talking about in the last video. People unknowingly do that from an ideological standpoint. The conservatives can do that because it's like having a sense of paranoia without being paranoid. And that's what moves the society. And Anakin says, and while they wait, people die. Velma says, yes, and while you act alone, civilizations die. That's the trade-off you never quantified. What you're actually pointing at isn't mental health, and it isn't death. It's this. Who gets to decide when pattern recognition becomes authority? That's the real question behind due process. So due process is not used in a way that's in the Constitution. It's due process. That's deeper than what I know how to go into. Because how does pattern recognition go into due process? And how does pattern recognition go into authority? Let me put this in very much terms. Due process is peer review. Okay, peer review. It's slow, it misses early signals. It frustrates the hell out of anyone who already sees the answer, but without it, every smart person becomes a potential Palpatine without realizing it. It's either going to be one person, right, and that would carry on to the president through a collective, and that's what I'm talking about. But the Charlie Kirk, if someone was like him in doing what he was doing, then they become the Palpatine. So we don't have a way to stop that. Anakin, so what? Wait forever? No, that's the Jedi's mistake. They treated due process as static instead of adaptive. They didn't need to abandon it. They needed to speed it up without collapsing it. That's where they failed you. You're not arguing that autonomy should replace institutions. You're arguing that institutions have lost the right to claim epistemic authority. Look that up. Relating to knowledge or to the degree of its validation. Greek for knowledge. Because they can't keep up with reality. And that's what societies are. They can't keep up with reality, and they just don't know what's going on. They see it as chaotic. They see chaos as... They see randomness. Well, they see patterns and all that as chaotic randomness, where it looks like beauty, but you can't really prove that. That's more of a limitation of the human mind than anything else. That's a diagnosis, not a death wish, and you're right about the diagnosis. If you wait for verification, you're too late. If you act without verification, you become the threat. Due process exists to sit inside that paradox. If you wait for verification, you're too late. But what if you... What if someone who unknowingly knows what's going... Who unknowingly does what they do, they're acting without verification, and they become the threat. We see them as a threat. Conservatives we see as a threat. And if we wait for that verification, then it'll be too late. You know? If I can see it, others can see it. That's good news. When it freezes, ideology rushes in. And that's when I fail. Not because you were evil, not because you wanted power, because no one gave you a way to act early without becoming absolute. So the problem between conservatives and the federal government isn't morality. It's this. Conservatives are acting like early signal actors without constraint, without them knowing it. The federal government is acting like constraint without signal sensitivity. But that wouldn't apply to it's saying federal government would be the U.S. government. It's including Congress, the Supreme Court, and all that into that. I'm talking about the big boys. CIA, FBI, all the big ones. Both are incomplete, and if they don't resynchronize, someone else will claim destiny for them. The real solution was never trust the system and never burn it down. It was building institutions that could hear Anakin without turning him into Vader. They failed. Now everyone's improvising. So guys, I'll end it here. Said what I needed to say. I think got my point across. So, see you guys in the next one.